You ever stop and think, how on earth do scientists keep track of the millions and millions of species on our planet? I mean, it sounds like an absolutely impossible job, right? Just pure chaos. But believe it or not, there's this really elegant system for turning all of that biological mess into beautiful, organized order. So let's get into it and break down exactly how it works.
Okay, but before we can even start organizing life, we've got to answer a much more basic question. What is it? And yeah, that sounds super simple, but it's way trickier than you think. I mean, think about it. Is a virus alive? It can make copies of itself, but only if it hijacks another cell. Or what about a crystal? It can grow. So what's the real dividing line here? What truly separates the living from the non-living? What are the absolute non-negotiable rules for being alive?
And that's exactly why we need a clear set of rules. You could think of it like a checklist, a list of criteria that every single living thing has to meet. And lucky for us, we don't have to invent it. Biologists have already put one together.
All right, so here it is, the official checklist for life. First up, you have to be made of cells. You also need to use energy. We call that metabolism. You've got to grow and, of course, reproduce. You also have to respond to what's going on around you, react to stimuli. And this one is crucial. As a species, you have to be able to adapt and evolve over generations. And look, this isn't a pick and choose kind of deal. It's not about checking one or two boxes. To be considered alive, you got to check all of them.
Okay, let's zoom in on that energy part for a sec. Metabolism. It's really like this constant balancing act. Two sides of the same coin. On one side, you've got anabolism. That's all about building stuff up. Think of a plant taking simple molecules and using sunlight, building them into complex sugars. Then, on the other side, you have catabolism. That's the opposite. It's all about breaking things down. Like when our bodies break down the food we eat to release energy. Every single living thing is doing this constant dance of building up and breaking down 24/7.
All right, so we've got our definition of what life is. Check. But that just opens up a whole new can of worms. We've identified millions of species, so how in the world do we name them all? And maybe even more important, how do we make sure that a scientist in Brazil and another one in Japan are talking about the exact same creature when they use a name?
And this is where common names just fall apart. I mean, they're a total mess. A starfish? Not a fish. A jellyfish? Also not a fish. Or a silverfish? Nope, that's an insect. And depending on where you are in the world, a single type of bird could have 10 different local names. It's just complete and utter confusion. We clearly needed a better way.
And the solution, which was seriously elegant, came from this amazing 18th century Swedish botanist, Carolus Linnaeus. He came up with a system he called binomial nomenclature. It's pretty straightforward. Bi means two, nomen means name. So a two-name system. The idea was simple but absolutely brilliant. Give every single species a unique two-part scientific name. And honestly, this one idea completely revolutionized biology.
And the best part is, the rules are beautifully simple. Here's how it works. The first name is the genus. For us, that's Homo. The second name is the species. For us, Sapiens. The genus is always capitalized, the species is never capitalized, and both of them are always written in italics. Put them together and you get Homo sapiens. And that unique two-part name means the same thing to every scientist everywhere on the planet. It's universal.
But okay, naming everything is really just the first step, right? It's like giving a title to every book in a giant library. Now you've got to figure out how to organize all those books on the shelves. So how do we build this grand library of all life? I love this way of thinking about it. Classification gives every single living thing a kind of cosmic address. And this address doesn't just tell you its name. It tells you exactly where it fits in the huge, interconnected web of all life on Earth.
And where does that address start? Well, it begins with the biggest, broadest category of all, the kingdom. We're talking super basic stuff here, like, is it an animal or a plant? That's the first big fork in the road.
So from that really broad kingdom, the whole system just gets more and more and more specific. The best way to picture it is like a set of Russian nesting dolls. You start with the biggest doll, the kingdom. And inside that, you find the phylum, then the class, then order, family, genus, and finally, you get to the tiniest little doll right in the middle, the individual species. Each level fits perfectly inside the one above it.
So let's see how this actually works in practice. Let's take us, humans. We're in the kingdom Animalia, right? We're animals. Our phylum is Chordata, which is just a fancy way of saying we have a backbone. Our class is Mammalia. We have hair, we produce milk, and the system just keeps getting more specific from there all the way down until it pinpoints Homo sapiens. And what's really cool is you can use this to trace relationships. Like, we share the same kingdom as a housefly. We're both animals. But man, we split off onto very different paths pretty much right after that.
Okay, so we've got the big ideas down, right? The rules of life, the two-name system, this whole nested hierarchy. But how do scientists actually, do this stuff in the real world? What kind of tools are in their toolkit?
Well, the general name for all this stuff is taxonomic aids, and you can basically think of them as the hardware and the software of classification. These are the tools that help scientists identify a new organism they've found and figure out exactly where its book belongs on the shelves of that huge library of life.
So here are a couple of great examples. On the one hand, you have something like a herbarium. That's a physical library, but instead of books, it's full of carefully pressed, dried, and preserved plant specimens. It's a real-world archive. And on the other hand, you've got a taxonomic key. This isn't a physical thing at all, it's a logical tool. It's basically a series of carefully crafted questions that leads you, step by step, to figuring out what you're looking at.
And how these keys work is just brilliant. The best way to think about it is like a choose-your-own-adventure book, but for biology. The key gives you a pair of choices, a fork in the road. It might be something simple like, does the leaf have smooth edges or toothed edges? You pick one, and that tells you which page to turn to, which leads to your next pair of choices. And you just keep going like that until, bam, you land on the exact identification of your organism.
So, we've gone through a lot here. We've talked about what life even is, how we name it, and how we organize it. But let's take a big step back for a second and ask the most important question. So what? Why do we go to all this trouble? Why does this whole system actually matter?
Well, for starters, just look at the sheer scale of what we're dealing with. That's the number of species we've already identified and given a name to. We're talking almost 2 million. Just try to imagine managing that much information without a solid, organized system. It would be completely impossible.
And that's where you see the real payoff. This system gives scientists all over the world a single, universal language to talk about life. It allows us to map out the evolutionary family tree to see how everything is connected. And maybe, most importantly today, it's the absolute foundation for conservation. Think about it. How can you protect a species if you don't even know it exists, or how it's related to everything else in its ecosystem? You just can't.
And that really brings us to the final amazing thought here. That huge number, almost 2 million species, that's just what we've found so far. It's just the beginning. Scientists estimate there are millions, maybe tens of millions more out there, waiting to be discovered in the deepest parts of the ocean or the most remote rainforests. This grand library of life, it's nowhere near finished. It's a living, breathing document, and with every single new discovery, we add another page. The only question left is, what are we going to find next?